You simply do not have the freedom that you think you have.
If you make a decision 10 seconds before you're aware that you've made that decision, then in those 10 seconds, you are not free to change your mind. Your mind has already been made up. You are just not aware of it. All right, welcome back to the party, everybody. I am your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Let's party! So this is a video I have been wanting to make for a long time. Do we have free will? Ever since I read Sam Harris's book, Free Will, about free will, it's a short book. It's like, it took me like an hour and a half to read. I was convinced that not only do we not have free will, but that free will is not even a sensical concept. So we have a video here from Rationality Rules called Free Will Debunked. Let's check it out. Starts out with a quote here. You are not controlling the storm, and you are not lost in it. You are the storm.
We all experience what is known in philosophy as libertarian free will. That is, we feel like we are in control of our actions, and that in a given situation we could have done otherwise. You feel, for example, like you've chosen to listen to me right now, and that at any moment you can choose to stop.
You think that, but you're wrong.
The problem, however, is that science is telling us, loud and clear and unequivocally, that while our feelings of free will are real, free will itself is an illusion. A very powerful one, for sure, but still just an illusion. This is Free Will Debunked. In 1999, the celebrated master of lateral thinking, Edward de Bono, was asked by the British Foreign Office to come up with a solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict in the Middle East, and to their bewilderment, his response was to give them a jar of Marmite. Now, while this seems absurd, his logic was nevertheless solid. In short, he reasoned that since the average person living in the affected geographic region has a zinc deficiency, and since a lack of zinc causes people to become irritable and belligerent, the way to resolve their conflict is to send them endless supplies of the zinc-rich product that is Marmite. Now, I personally think that this is a stroke of genius, but the reason I bring it up is not to interest you in de Bono's work, though if I have, that's great. It's to illustrate that external factors that we are mostly unaware of and over which we have no conscious control, at least in part determine our consciousness, which in turn determines our decisions. A lack of zinc can indeed cause us to make aggressive decisions, just as a dose of caffeine can make us choose to be productive. But what am I getting at here? All these discoveries prove is that part of our consciousness is predetermined, not that all of it is. So what's my point? Well, the realization and subsequent proof that external factors at least in part determine our consciousness has led many of humanity's greatest minds to suspect that our consciousness might be entirely determined by external factors. That despite the fact we're conscious, we're no more free than the wind.
So the idea here is that everything has a cause. Everything that you do is caused by something that you didn't choose. And so if every decision that you make is based on something that happened that you didn't choose, then that's not really a free choice.
This, needless to say, is a very compelling hypothesis that, if true, would have unprecedented effects on our notions of praise, blame, pride, and guilt. But that's all it's ever been, an untested hypothesis. That is, until very recently, with the birth and rapid advancement of neuroscience. However, before we move on to neuroscience, I want to clear up an extremely prevalent myth about this position, which for those of you unaware is known in philosophy as determinism. The myth is that determinism is another word for fatalism, which is the assertion that absolutely everything is predetermined, and that therefore absolutely everything is inevitable. The truth, however, is that while many fatalists call themselves determinists, and hence exacerbate this myth, determinism is merely the assertion that human consciousness is predetermined.
So that's an important distinction. We have fatalism, well, that everything is predetermined, whereas determinism is just referring to human consciousness, that any decisions that you might make, anything that you are going to choose is predetermined, not necessarily everything in the universe.
It makes no claim whatsoever about the rest of the universe. Now, I grant that this distinction might seem pedantic, but it's not. It's extremely important, and the reason for this is because many people are convinced that various studies in quantum mechanics have demonstrated that the quantum world is random, and that therefore determinism is false. But with the definition clearly presented on screen, I'm sure you can see the issue here. Even if the quantum world is non-deterministic, this would not invalidate determinism. Sure, it would invalidate fatalism, but it would not invalidate determinism.
Again, determinism being that human consciousness is predetermined.
Anyhow, with this myth now thoroughly addressed, let's look at what neuroscience has to say. In 1983, the pioneering scientist, Benjamin Libet, conducted a study in which he wired up subjects to an EEG machine to measure their brain activity. He then put a timer in front of them, asked them to consciously decide to perform a hand movement, perform the hand movement, and then report the exact time that they had made a conscious decision.
This
and
is
the results
wild.
were extremely fascinating.
This is
He
wild.
found that the onset of cerebral activity clearly preceded by several hundred milliseconds the reported time of conscious intention to act.
So if somebody with a machine can tell what you're going to do before you do it, then is that really a free choice? Because again, free will entails the idea that if we were to turn back the clock and everything were exactly the same, that you would have been able to do something different or to make a different choice. But if it's already logged, however many, let's say 10 milliseconds before you actually consciously choose to do that thing, then in that 10 milliseconds, the choice has already been made. You are just not aware of it. The choice has already been locked in. You're just not aware of it.
Or in other words, that the subject's brain had initiated the movement long before the subject had consciously made the decision to move. Now, while this study was groundbreaking in the fact that it suggested that our consciousness is entirely determined and that therefore free will is an illusion, it didn't prove it, because it left unaddressed a few disputable concerns. Namely, that the brain activity didn't predict a specific outcome of a choice, and that the delay was only a few hundred milliseconds, which means that this simply could have been due to latency.
Fair enough.
But in 2008, in response to these criticisms, Chun Sion-soon conducted a similar experiment using an fMRI machine, in which he asked subjects to freely choose between, and then immediately press, one of two buttons that were operated by the subject's left and right index fingers.
So now we have a left button and a right button, and we have fMRI technology.
And his results were truly remarkable. He found that the outcome of a decision can be encoded in brain activity of prefrontal and parietal cortex up to 10 seconds before it enters awareness. 10 seconds.
Up to 10 seconds. So if you make a decision 10 seconds before you're aware that you've made that decision, then in those 10 seconds, you are not free to change your mind. Your mind has already been made up. You are just not aware of it. And so does that mean that you don't have the capability of choosing something different? I would say yes. Some people would think, well, okay, like that's just the brain processes, and the free choice that I made was encoded before I was aware of it, but that doesn't mean that my choice wasn't free. But again, we're talking about these choices that are made based on things that you didn't choose.
And he went on to conclude that this delay presumably reflects the operation of a network of high-level control areas that begin to prepare an upcoming decision long before it enters awareness. Now, if Libet's experiment poked free will, Soon's drop-kicked it. Because if we can accurately predict what you're going to do before you've even made a conscious decision, then your consciousness is evidently not free. And therefore, your conscious decisions are not free.
Nope.
Or to put it another way, because your consciousness is predetermined, your free will is an illusion. You simply do not have the freedom that you think you have.
You simply do not have the freedom you think you have. It is an illusion. Now, we could talk all day about this, and I do want to do a full stream. Check me out live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's if you enjoy these, you will definitely love being part of the chat, and it's a good old time. There's a reason we call them stream parties. But, we're not going to go too deep, but fact of the matter is, you simply do not have the freedom you think you have.
In light of these studies, and of many more, each with differing equipment and methodologies, Harris has written that one fact now seems indisputable. Some moments before you are aware of what you will do next, a time in which you subjectively appear to have complete freedom to behave however you please, your brain has already determined what you will do. You then become conscious of this decision, and believe that you are in the process of making it.
So once you're feeling like, okay, I'm going to choose this, that decision has already been made. So this is something that could go in a million different directions. What are you guys thinking about this? Let me know. Let's start a conversation in the comments. This is something that is so interesting to me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for partying with me. Once again, I am your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Until next time, guys, I am out of here. Peace.